She was 22 years old. She had a van, a dream, and a boyfriend she had loved since high school. On the morning of August 25th, 2021, Gabby Petito sent her mother a text message. It was normal, casual, the kind of text a daughter sends when everything is fine. But everything was not fine. And what happened in the hours after that message, what was said, what was seen, and what was deliberately hidden, is the part of this story that no official report has ever fully explained. My name is Host Name, and this is Before the Killer, the channel that asks the question no one else is asking. Not just what happened, what they knew before it did. Because here is what we know. Before Gabby Petito disappeared, there were warning signs. There were witnesses. There were officers. There were cameras. There was a 911 call. There was body camera footage that went public and made the entire world stop and stare. And still, she did not come home. Today, we are going to walk through every moment, every text, every stop, every decision. And we are going to ask the question that has haunted this case since the beginning. What did the people around Gabby Petito see? And what did they choose to do with it? Pause. Gabby Petito grew up in Blue Point, New York. She was the kind of kid who made friends easily, warm, creative, someone who lit up a room without trying. She loved art. She loved the outdoors. And from a young age, she had a specific dream that a lot of people her age share, but few actually chase. She wanted to see this country, all of it. The mountains and the deserts and the places most people only see in photographs. Her mother, Nicole Schmidt, described her as free-spirited. Her stepfather, Jim Schmidt, described her as someone who always found a way to make the people around her laugh. She was the kind of daughter who texted back, the kind who called, the kind who shared everything. She met Brian Laundrie when they were teenagers. By all outward appearances, they were the perfect millennial couple. Adventurous, photogenic, social media savvy. They built an Instagram presence around their travels. They called themselves travel bloggers. The account was called Nomadic Static. Followers watched them hike, cook in their van, wake up to sunrises over canyons. What followers did not see was what happened when the camera was off. Pause. In June of 2021, Gabby and Brian left Blue Point in a white Ford Transit van they had converted themselves. The plan was a cross-country road trip, the American West, national parks, the kind of adventure they had been planning for months. Gabby had recently left her job at a department store. Brian had recently quit his. They were all in. Gabby documented the trip obsessively. She posted videos, she tagged locations. She smiled at the camera and talked about how beautiful everything was. Her last YouTube video was posted on July 18th, 2021. She looked happy. She talked about hiking. She showed off the van. She had no idea it would be the last video her subscribers ever saw from her. Behind the scenes, according to text messages and witness accounts that would later emerge, the trip was not going the way the Instagram photos suggested. There were arguments. There were silences. There were moments that people who were close to the situation would later describe as alarming, though at the time, no one used that word out loud. And then came August 12th. Pause. On the evening of August 12th, 2021, police in Moab, Utah received a 911 call. The caller reported witnessing a domestic incident involving a man and a woman near a white van. The caller, a bystander who had witnessed something that made him uncomfortable enough to pick up the phone, described what he saw as a man hitting a woman. Officers responded. They located the van. They spoke with both Gabby and Brian separately. What happened in the next several hours would become one of the most analyzed pieces of law enforcement footage in recent American history. The body camera recordings from the Moab City Police Department were later released to the public. Millions of people watched them. Millions of people formed opinions about what those recordings showed. But here is what the recordings actually document, according to the footage itself. Gabby was visibly distressed. She was crying. She was struggling to articulate what had happened. At one point, she described hitting Brian first, and officers noted that she appeared to be the primary aggressor based on their investigation. Brian had a scratch on his face. He was calm. He was composed. He spoke clearly and cooperatively. The officers made a decision. They separated the couple for the night. Brian stayed at a motel. Gabby stayed in the van. No charges were filed. No arrest was made. The incident was logged as a mental health crisis. The 911 caller, the person who had called to report a man hitting a woman, was not interviewed on camera. Gabby and Brian drove away together the next morning. Pause now. Before we go any further, I want to be precise about what I am saying and what I am not saying. The officers who responded that night followed the protocols available to them. Domestic violence cases are among the most complex and dangerous situations law enforcement faces. Victims frequently minimize what has happened. Situations are rarely as clear in the moment as they appear in retrospect. And the Moab City Police Department has not been criminally charged in connection with this case. But here is the question that the before the killer lens demands we ask. A 911 caller reported a man hitting a woman. Officers arrived. They spoke to both parties. They noted visible distress on the part of the woman. They noted a physical mark on the man. They separated them for the night and then released them both. What would have happened if the outcome of that stop had been different? That is not a question with a comfortable answer, and it is not a question that the official reports have ever fully addressed. Pause August 25th, 2021. This is the date that matters. This is where the last message lives. On this morning, Gabby sent a text to her mother, Nicole Schmidt. The message, according to Nicole's own public statements and reporting by multiple outlets, referenced a grandfather. It mentioned that they were near a national park with no cell service. It said she would be hard to reach. Nicole thought nothing of it. Her daughter was on a road trip. Limited cell service was normal. The message was not alarming, but investigators would later examine that message closely. And what they found, or more precisely, what they could not definitively confirm, raised questions that have never been fully resolved. The message was sent from Gabby's phone. That is confirmed. The content of the message referenced things that were unusual for Gabby's typical communication patterns. According to Nicole's later statements to law enforcement and to media, the grandfather reference, in particular, was something Nicole found strange enough that she mentioned it when she later spoke about the message publicly. According to Nicole Schmidt's own public statements, she would later question whether her daughter actually wrote that message. Pause. Let me sit with that for a moment. A mother, receiving what she believes is a text from her daughter, telling her she is fine, telling her not to worry, telling her she is somewhere with no cell service. And that mother, who knew her daughter better than anyone, later saying publicly that she was not sure her daughter wrote those words. We will come back to that message, because what investigators eventually found about the timing of that communication changes everything. Pause. Gabby's family did not hear from her again after August 25th, but at first they were not alarmed. Not immediately. She had said she would be somewhere with limited service. Brian was with her. He was her partner of 4 years. There was no reason in that moment to believe something was wrong. Brian Laundrie returned to his parents' home in Northport, Florida on September 1st, 2021. He was alone. He drove the white Ford Transit van that he and Gabby had shared across the country. He pulled into the driveway of his parents' house at 1516 Logical Lane. He went inside. He did not call Gabby's family. His parents did not call Gabby's family. For 10 days, the Laundrie family said nothing. Gabby's mother had been trying to reach her daughter. She had been texting. She had been calling. She was not getting responses. At some point, according to Nicole's later statements, she reached out to the Laundrie family directly. She was told, according to her own public account, to contact a lawyer. Pause. On September 11th, 2021, 10 days after Brian returned home alone, Gabby Petito was officially reported missing by her family. The case went public within hours. Within 24 hours, it was a national story. Within 48 hours, it was an international story. The speed at which Gabby's case captured public attention was extraordinary. It also sparked an important and necessary conversation about which missing persons cases receive that kind of attention, and which ones do not. That conversation is ongoing and it is valid. But today, our focus is on Gabby. on what happened to her, and on what was known before it did. Pause. Law enforcement moved quickly once the case went public. The FBI became involved. The National Park Service became involved. Northport Police were involved. This was not a small investigation. Resources were deployed. On September 14th, 3 days after Gabby was reported missing, Brian Laundrie was named a person of interest. He had not spoken to investigators. His parents had retained a lawyer on his behalf. On September 17th, Brian Laundrie was reported missing by his own family. His parents told law enforcement he had gone for a hike in the Carlton Reserve, a vast, swampy nature preserve near Northport, on September 13th and had not returned. The timing of that disappearance was not lost on investigators or on the public. Pause. On September 19th, 2021, search teams working in the Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming made a discovery. Human remains were found in an area of the forest near where Gabby and Brian had been seen in late August. The remains were later confirmed through dental records to be those of Gabby Petito. She was 22 years old. The manner of death was determined by the Teton County coroner to be homicide. The cause of death was manual strangulation. Pause. The investigation that followed was extensive. Law enforcement pieced together the final weeks of Gabby's life through a combination of cell tower data, surveillance footage, witness accounts, social media posts, debit card transactions, and the body camera footage from the Moab stop. What emerged was a picture of a relationship that had been deteriorating and of a victim who, according to the evidence, had tried to hold things together. Credit card and debit card records showed purchases made in the days before and after Gabby's estimated date of death. Some of those purchases were made in locations consistent with where the couple had been traveling. Others raised questions that investigators spent months working to fully answer. Cell tower data placed Gabby's phone in specific geographic locations at specific times. The analysis of that data, particularly around the days immediately following August 25th, formed a critical part of the investigation's timeline. And then there was the question of the text messages. Pause. This is the part of the case that investigators, journalists, and the public have wrestled with since the beginning. The text message sent from Gabby's phone on August 25th, the message that referenced a grandfather, the message that Nicole Schmidt would later publicly question. FBI investigators examined the metadata of that message. They examined the phone record. They examined the patterns of communication in the days surrounding it, according to information that emerged through investigative reporting and through the FBI's own public statements about the case. Investigators found that the message was sent from Gabby's phone, but the circumstances surrounding when and how it was sent remained a subject of the investigation. Nicole Schmidt has stated publicly that she believes the message was not written by her daughter. She has been consistent about this in multiple interviews. The FBI has not publicly confirmed or denied her belief. What the FBI did confirm is this. Based on their investigation, Gabby Petito died on or about August 27, 2021, 2 days after that last text message was sent. Pause. Brian Laundrie was found on October 20th, 2021, in the Carlton Reserve. His remains were discovered in an area that had been underwater during the initial search. A notebook was found near his remains. A handgun was recovered in the area. The cause of death was determined to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He left a written statement. The details of that statement, its full contents, have not been publicly released. What law enforcement and the Laundrie family's attorney have confirmed is that in the statement, Brian Laundrie admitted to being responsible for Gabby Petito's death. No one else was charged. No one else was tried. The case was closed by law enforcement as a homicide perpetrated by Brian Laundrie. Pause. But the case that law enforcement closed is not the same as the questions that remain open, because here is what we know, and here is what we still cannot fully account for. We know that a 911 caller on August 12th reported witnessing a man strike a woman near a white van in Moab, Utah. That caller was specific. That caller was concerned enough to pick up the phone. We know that officers responded and spent significant time with both individuals and made a determination that the woman in the van was the primary aggressor. We know that no charges were filed. We know the couple drove away together. We know that 13 days later, the last confirmed communication from Gabby's phone was sent. We know the contents of that communication struck her own mother as strange enough that she would later publicly question whether her daughter wrote it. We know that Brian Laundrie drove home alone on September 1st. We know his family said nothing for 10 days. We know that when Gabby's family reached out, they were told to contact a lawyer. We know that the Moab City Police Department later conducted an internal review of the August 12th stop. That review found that officers had not followed department protocols during the incident. Pause. 2 officers involved in the Moab stop were later disciplined. The nature and extent of that discipline was described as administrative. Neither officer faced criminal charges. The city of Moab reached a settlement with the Petito and Schmidt families. The terms of that settlement were not fully disclosed. What the settlement did not provide, what settlements rarely provide, is an answer to the fundamental question: if August 12th had gone differently, if the protocols had been followed, if the 911 caller's account had been weighted differently, if the determination about who was the primary aggressor had been made differently, would Gabby Petito have gone home? Pause. I want to talk about what this case revealed about the systems we rely on, because this is the core of what Before the Killer exists to examine. The Moab stop is not an aberration. Domestic violence calls are among the most frequent calls law enforcement responds to. Officers are trained. Protocols exist. And yet, the gap between what protocols say and what happens in the field is a gap that advocates, researchers, and survivors have been documenting for decades. The dynamics of intimate partner violence are complicated in ways that are not always visible from the outside. A victim who appears to be the aggressor. A perpetrator who is calm and cooperative. A relationship that looks fine to everyone watching from a distance. These are not new observations. They are documented. They are studied. They are known. And still, the system, in this case, did what systems often do. It logged the incident. It separated the parties for a night. It moved on. Pause. There is something else about this case that demands to be named directly. Gabby Petito's case received an unprecedented level of public attention. The speed and scale of the response, from law enforcement, from media, from the general public, was extraordinary. And in the weeks and months that followed her disappearance, advocates and family members of other missing persons, particularly missing Indigenous women, missing Black women, missing women of color who had received a fraction of that attention, spoke openly about the disparity. The National Crime Information Center reported that in 2021, there were tens of thousands of missing persons cases in the United States involving Black individuals. The majority received no national coverage, no viral social media campaigns, no cable news breaking alerts. This is not Gabby's fault. This is not her family's fault. Her family fought for her with everything they had, and they deserved every resource that was deployed. But the conversation her case forced into the open is a necessary one, and it is ongoing. And it is one that the true crime community, including channels like this one, has a responsibility to acknowledge honestly. Who we pay attention to, who we search for, who we mourn publicly. These are not neutral decisions. Pause. The Gabby Petito Foundation was established by Gabby's parents in her memory. It focuses on providing resources for families of missing persons, regardless of background, race, or socioeconomic status. Nicole Schmidt and Joe Petito have spoken publicly about making that mission central to their daughter's legacy. They have testified before legislators. They have advocated for policy changes. They have turned their grief into something that could help other families who find themselves in the position they never imagined they would be in. Gabby would have turned 23 in 2022. Pause. Now I want to come back to the text message one more time, because I think it is the most important unresolved question in this case, and I think it has not received the examination it deserves. Nicole Schmidt has been consistent across multiple interviews. She found the message strange, the grandfather reference, the tone, the phrasing. Brian Laundrie was in possession of Gabby's phone after her death. That is established by the timeline. He was alone. He had the van. He had her belongings. The FBI investigated the message. They have not publicly stated that the message was written by someone other than Gabby, but they have also not definitively stated that it was written by her. The coroner estimated Gabby's date of death as on or about August 27th. The message was sent on August 25th. The 2-day gap is consistent with the possibility that Gabby was alive when the message was sent. It is also consistent with other possibilities that the investigation examined. What the FBI confirmed publicly is that the investigation of those communications was thorough. What they have not done is close the door on Nicole Schmidt's account of what she observed about that message. A mother knows her daughter's voice, even in text. And Nicole Schmidt has never stopped saying that something about that message was wrong. Pause. I want to give you 3 things to take away from Gabby's story. Not generic safety advice. 3 specific lessons drawn from the specific facts of this case. The first comes from August 12th in Moab. When law enforcement responds to a domestic incident involving an intimate couple, the person who appears calm is not automatically the person who is safe. Perpetrators of intimate partner violence are frequently skilled at presenting as composed, cooperative, and reasonable, particularly in high-stakes encounters with authority figures. The research on this is extensive. If you are a bystander who witnesses something that concerns you, your 911 call matters. Make it specific. Describe exactly what you saw. Ask if you can provide a written statement. The caller in Moab did the right thing by calling. What the system did with that call is where things broke down. The second comes from the 10 days of silence after Brian returned home alone. When someone returns from a trip without the person they left with and cannot or will not explain where that person is, that is not a communication breakdown. That is information. The Laundrie family retained a lawyer and said nothing. That is their legal right. But the 10 days between September 1st and September 11th, the 10 days during which Gabby's family was trying to reach her, was being told to contact a lawyer, was not being given answers, were 10 days during which search efforts that might have begun earlier did not begin. Time matters in missing persons cases. If you have information about where a missing person was last seen, that information needs to reach law enforcement, not after consultations. Now, the third comes from the last text message. If you receive a message from someone you love that feels off, even slightly, trust that feeling. Nicole Schmidt said the message felt strange. She did not act on that feeling immediately, and that is completely understandable because there was no way for her to know in that moment what it meant. But the instinct she had was correct. If you receive communication from someone you care about that doesn't sound like them, the word choice, the reference, the tone, it is worth a phone call. It is worth pushing past the surface message to make direct contact. In an era where phones can be accessed by people other than their owners, the message on the screen is not always the voice behind it. Pause. Gabrielle Venora Petito was born on March 19, 1999, in Blue Point, New York. She grew up collecting moments, chasing sunrises, filling notebooks with sketches and plans and ideas for a life she was absolutely going to live. She was 22 years old. She loved her van and her camera and the mountains and the people who loved her back. She deserved to come home. Pause. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it. Not just scroll past it, but sit with it. 2 officers responded to that Moab stop. They spoke with Gabby. They saw she was distressed. They made a decision. An internal review later found that department protocols were not followed. Those officers received administrative discipline, no criminal charges, no public accountability hearing, a civil settlement with terms that were not fully disclosed. Gabby did not make it home. Do you believe that administrative discipline is a sufficient response to a protocol failure that preceded a homicide? Do you think the officers who responded that night should have faced a different level of accountability? Or do you believe they made the best call they could with what they had in front of them? I want to know what you think. Drop it in the comments. Be specific, because the conversation that happens in this comment section, the real, honest, complicated conversation, is part of how this channel does what it does. It is part of how these stories keep mattering after the news cycle moves on. If this video made you think, if it made you angry, if it made you want to know more, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm that this story deserves to be seen. Every like puts Gabby's name in front of someone who may never have heard it. And if you are not yet subscribed to Before the Killer, this is the channel that does not just cover what happened. It covers what they knew before it did. Every week, we look at the warning signs that were visible, the systems that were tested, and the decisions that could have gone differently. If those are the questions you want answered, subscribe right now. It is free, and you will not regret it, because the most dangerous killers are not the ones no one saw coming. They are the ones everyone saw, and no one stopped. Pause. Gabby Petito deserved better than August 27, 2021. She deserved the rest of her life. Remember her name.